Hi, Paul Daniels here. Let's talk about misdirection.
History happened everywhere.
G'day mates, my name is Pito, and I'm here in the HHE studio with the wannabe to my wallaby, it's Ryan-O.
G'day mate, how are ya?
As you may have guessed, last week the Derzolator gave us magic tricks in New South Wales during the Edo period, 1603 to 1868.
Edo? I know him, he's from Canberra.
Now, I know that our listeners are under the illusion that we will have some fun facts for them. So, why don't you, Ryan, be my glamorous assistant and tell our listeners what we've pulled out of the hat for today's episode?
Alright, well look, get ready everybody, because we're going to be pulling back the curtain on a magical place where history hides in the wings and danger lurks around every wombat. We're going to be revealing the wandering conjurer who braved goldfields and gunfire, trying to outwit the locals, and see how a few magic words helped an empire pull off the greatest vanishing act in history. But we're also going to reveal why horses are best to be avoided and find out why residents love the cockroaches. And so, with the whispered words of the great illusionist before me, I say abracadabra, I welcome you to the first state, to the cabbage garden. Welcome to New South Wales.
Hold me in your arms, don't let me go. I want to stay forever, home and away, with you each day.
Well, Ryan, I am excited, thrilled and titillated by that introduction, but I want to get on with it. So, tell me, where are we? New South Wales? Is that in Wales?
It's not in Wales, Pete. No. If we're going to find where we're going, we're going to need to head down south to the land of kangaroos and kookaburras, to Australia.
Hurrah!
Yep, it's a land that is divided up into 2 territories and 6 states, one of which is called New South Wales, better known by the abbreviation NSW.
Yeah, that's not safe for work.
Not safe work. Yeah. Basically, if Australia was a clock, New South Wales covers the space between where 3 and 4 o'clock would be, so on that right-hand side.
Gotcha.
So that means, as we're looking at the country, New South Wales is located on the right-hand side, bordered by Queensland to the north, Victoria to the south, and the Pacific Ocean to the east.
Got it.
It's a state that includes places like Byron Bay, Hunter Valley, the Blue Mountains. It's got coastal plains, inland plateaus. It's got Australia's highest mountain.
Ooh.
2,228 metres high.
Nice.
Australia's most haunted house.
Ooh.
And a 15.2 metre tall concrete sheep statue known as Rambo.
Oh, I love a big thing.
It's also got a museum dedicated to Devonian fish fossils.
I prefer the big thing. Sorry, fossils.
Size-wise, Pete, New South Wales covers approximately 800,000 square kilometres. That's 309,000 square miles, making it about 1.5 times the size of France.
Just blows your mind how big places in Australia are, doesn't it? That's just a state.
It's also the most populous Australian state. So it's got a population of around 8.5 million people. Most of them live in the state's capital, which is Sydney.
Sydney. Ah, lovely chap.
Yeah, 62% of the people live there. And of course, Sydney, famous for the Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, the birthplace of Nicole Kidman, Hugh Jackman and Errol Flynn, and also the Granny Smith apple.
Oh, Errol Flynn I did not know. Or the Granny Smith apple, for that matter.
I was surprised that you went with Errol Flynn over the Granny Smith, but there you go. Yeah, Granny Smith, first cultivated in Sydney in the 19th century by a Maria Ann
Smith.
That's right. Now, the main industries are finance, insurance, manufacturing, and tourism. 33% of the residents report no religion, otherwise the largest faith is Roman Catholic. The currency is the Australian dollar. The state animal is the duck-billed platypus.
Nice. That's the bonkers animal if ever there was one.
The state flag, adopted in 1876, features a blue background with the British Union Jack flag in the top left corner, with a white disc in the middle right that contains a red St. George's cross. Oh, and a golden lion. Oh, and an 8-pointed gold star.
I feel that was a committee decision.
Now, Peter, sadly, there is no official state anthem.
Oh.
However, if you are a New South Wales Rugby League fan, then you might disagree.
Oh, I love it.
Let's see what you think.
I'm liking it. Shake my money maker. Straight to business.
Exactly. So, New South Wales, they've been playing rugby league football since 1907, Pete.
Wow.
Yeah, love old time. They are known as the Blues because they wear sky blue jerseys.
Oh, so imaginative.
They're also known as the Cockroaches since the 1970s.
That's charming.
It comes from a rival coach who grew frustrated at losing to them, so he just called them a bunch of cockroaches. The media picked up on it, and then it's since just been adopted as like a badge of honour.
Nice.
They've won 17 State of Origin Series titles, 54 Interstate Series titles, and yet they are still overshadowed by the success of their rivals, Queensland.
Boo.
Anyway, there you go. How about some New South Wales facts?
I love it. Have them. Bring them.
Okay, so New South Wales is a beautiful place, Pete,
I don't doubt it.
but it's also a dangerous part of the world.
I also don't doubt that.
So, in 1936, Gilbert Hamilton was walking home in Bilumbil, New South Wales, when he was attacked by a kangaroo. He tried to fend off the animal by hitting it with a sack of bananas. But ultimately, the bananas didn't work and he succumbed to his wounds and he died.
Oh, man. Well, I'm going to stop carrying a sack of bananas for self-defense if it's going to prove that useless.
Yeah, that's a pretty terrible self-defense weapon. In 2018, an elderly woman was repeatedly headbutted to death by a goat on her farm in rural New South Wales.
Oh, my lord. A goat butted to death. That is not good.
No, it's not. In 2019, a cyclist in Wollongong, he suffered fatal head injuries while swerving into traffic to avoid a magpie attack.
Wow. Killer magpies. I didn't have that on my bingo card, I must admit.
Right? This is crazy Australian animals. In 2021, a man was out surfing in Tuncurry Beach on New South Wales mid-north coast when he was bitten in half by a 4.5 metre long great white shark.
See that? Tragic though it is, I'm down with that. The magpie thing is still perturbing me.
Not the headbutting by a goat.
The headbutting by the goats are kind of ornery. I'm not entirely surprised by that either. But magpie assault, it's aerial. You don't see that coming.
I think he did see it coming, though. That's why he swerved.
Oh, good point.
Yeah. Anyway, New South Wales also home to the world's most deadliest spiders.
Oh, you know my feelings about spiders.
I do. The funnel web spider. The good news is, though, Pete, there have been no recorded fatalities since the implementation of a statewide anti-venom program introduced in 1981.
Oh, that's encouraging. I shall bear that in mind when I'm visiting.
There are no recorded deaths by crocodile, you'll also be pleased to hear.
I feel there's a but coming on this one.
Correct. But cows are responsible for the deaths of 33 people.
Killer cows.
Worse than that, though, 77 people killed by horses.
Horses? I have a fear of horses as well, actually, so that doesn't surprise me because horses are the enemy.
So there you go. You see, everybody talks about the dangerous animals of Australia, the snakes and the spiders and the crocodiles and the sharks, but it's horses you want to watch out for.
Yeah, you get a hoof in your chops, you will know all about it.
Oh, hoof in your chops. Now, whales in New South Wales.
What?
Yeah, I was curious. Are there whales in New South Wales? And yes, there are whales in New South Wales. Humpback whales specifically, they're the most common. Approximately 40,000 of them seen migrating along New South Wales coast every year.
Oh, I love whales. I'm glad to hear that they're doing, well, they may not be doing okay, but at least there's some left.
They're doing better. But they're not alone, the humpbacks. They've also got southern right whales, orcas, minke whales, blue whales, and even your favourite, Pete, sperm whales.
Oh, I love a sperm whale.
You do indeed. Unfortunately, though, Pete, whales in New South Wales are dangerous.
Well, that had to happen, really, didn't it?
It did, yeah. On the 30th of September 2023, two men in their 50s were sailing out in their fishing boat when at 6 in the morning, about 14 kilometres southeast of Sydney, their boat was struck by a breaching whale, which sank the boat, caused one of the men to drown.
Yeah, that's not like being attacked by a whale, though, is it? That's just like when you tread on an insect as you're walking along. It is just you're just a passing casualty of being much, much smaller than another creature.
Yeah. Anyway, that's it.
Lovely. They were good. New South Wales.
Facts! Hey, Pete.
Hey, Ryan.
Pick a card. Any card.
Ooh, a magic trick. I love these. Okay, I've got one.
Okay, don't tell me what it is. Just look at it, remember it, slide it back into the pack. Any way you choose. Anywhere at all.
All right. Okay. Yep. Done that.
Now I say the magic word. Alacaroiden. And hey presto, is this your card?
No.
Huh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, right, hang on. Yeah, okay, I see. Is this your card?
No.
It's not the Seven of Hearts.
No.
All right, is this your card?
No.
This one?
No.
Right. Alacaroiden, is this your card?
It is not.
This one?
Look, is this going to take long?
Is it this one?
No.
This one?
No.
Is it this one?
No.
Is it this one?
No.
How about this one?
It's not that one either.
What about that one?
No.
How about those?
It is not.
Is it this one?
That's even further.
Alrighty, Peter, come on, that's it. We now know where it is, but what I don't know is why it's called New South Wales, and indeed all of its history. So orient me in terms of time.
Get ready to be oriented, and we shall start somewhere between 40,000 and 60,000 years ago.
Heck yes!
This is when a group of canoes rocks up on the shores of Australia.
How do we know this?
Well, there's been modelling by archaeologists that suggest that the canoes that rocked up in Australia were not accidental. They've analysed the currents, and they've figured that there was intentional paddling over 4 to 7 days across open ocean, probably having set out from the island of Timor. So
Okay, watching out for whales.
Well, yeah, and I had kind of assumed there was a sort of trickle of people into Australia, but mitochondrial DNA studies have suggested that the founding population could easily have been just 100 to 300 people in a single arrival colonising event.
That's still a lot of people.
It is a lot of people, but and I should mention that there is some debate. Some people say people did come over time, but that was one particular view from this DNA study that happened.
Wow.
Now, it was obviously a successful venture because the population grew and spread and became a bunch of different tribes and peoples, including the Wadi Wadi people, the Banjalung people, the Wiradjuri people, Gamilarey, Yuin, Ngarigo, Guiagal, and Giampar peoples. So a bunch of different tribes. They grew and they spread and they became the Aboriginal people of Australia.
Okay, the ones we know and love.
In fact, yes, before European settlement, there are estimated to have been about 250,000 Aboriginal people in the region, none of whom, of course, would have recognised the name New South Wales.
250,000, that's amazing.
Yes, indeed.
From a boat of 300.
But we can get to New South Wales, Ryan, because enter the commanding officer of the HMS Endeavour that was out on a secret mission to discover a big landmass in the southern hemisphere. You know who this is?
Sounds familiar.
You know who this chap?
Is it Cook?
It is, of course, Lieutenant James Cook, accompanied by our favourite botanist, Joseph Banks.
Yay!
Now, James Cook found this landmass that he was looking for, and he started to survey the east coast of what was an area that had, in fact, already been identified by Dutch explorers, and they named it with their usual imaginative flair, New Holland.
Right, okay.
But Cook is on the side that hasn't been visited before, and he draws the coastline and claims the whole vague area in general for Britain, and showing a similar eye for marketing as his Dutch predecessors, New Wales, he calls it.
Okay, not New South Wales.
Not at first, but then he changes it for reasons that nobody quite understands to New South Wales.
Oh, okay. Maybe because it looked more like South Wales. South Wales is lovely. North Wales, less so lovely.
The truth is there are a number of different theories, none of which are particularly definitive. So we don't really know why he chose the name. Could have been because it looked like Wales. It could have been just because he's running out of place names to apply to places he thinks he's discovered. But it's not really certain how he decided on the name. So these guys landed in an area so filled with diverse and exciting new plants and animals, they called it Botany Bay.
Oh, is that why it's called that?
Yeah, and Joseph Banks, as the local science guy, he's so delighted with the place, he suggests to an American pal that this would be a great spot for a prison.
What?
He genuinely...
Not a greenhouse.
Yeah, Joseph Banks was the one who suggested this would make a terrific penal colony. And so in 1786, the UK government announced its intention to send convicts to Botany Bay.
Wow, okay, so all those people that got sent there have got Joseph Banks to thank.
Yeah, this established the colony of New South Wales.
Thanks, Banks.
Now, the first arrivals are what was known as the First Fleet. This is 11 ships that arrive in January 1788 with more than 1,000 settlers in it.
More than the 300 that came before.
Very much so. So they established their first settlement at Sydney Cove. But life was not easy in the new settlement, Ryan, possibly because convicts don't necessarily make the most motivated of settlers.
No, not when they've been carted 6 months across the world.
Against their will in almost all cases.
Yeah.
But, you know, they had to survive because they were literally on their own for 2 years until the second fleet arrived in 1790.
And there's got to have been a point after the first year where they thought, maybe they're not coming anymore. We're just
This is
here
it,
now.
guys.
This is it. Yeah.
But yeah, so a bit of a rocky start, but things settle down, the settlements start to spread and grow. And what did they spread with them, of course? European diseases.
The best kind of diseases.
Yeah, and a smorgasbord of them at that. And the indigenous Australians had little resistance to these. So you combine that with them being pushed off their land as it was settled by the newcomers and in some cases outright warfare. It's fair to say it was overall a bad time for the Aboriginal Australians.
Yeah, tricky. They don't have much in the way of armaments, do they?
No, indeed. And it was set to stay thus for quite a long time to come as well. So over time, the proportion of convicts to free settlers starts to shift. And in 1840, actually, the transportation of convicts is abolished.
Good.
1851, what do we discover? Gold in them thar hills.
Everyone loves a bit of gold.
Yeah, the gold rush was on, massively increases the wealth in the area and the population of the area, unsurprisingly.
It's a long way to go, isn't it, for a gold rush?
Yeah, but there were people who went literally from San Francisco to Australia because they were chasing the gold.
I would have done too.
Yeah, me too. Right, the gold rush, though, was also notable for bringing in a wider variety of immigrants. You see more European countries represented and Chinese miners come in, which is the source of some racial tensions for a while.
Imagine that.
I know, shock. 1858, there's another gold rush in the north, and that causes another state to be established, also cut from the ever-diminishing New South Wales territory, and this is Queensland, created in 1859. This brings New South Wales into largely the shape we know today. So when it started, it was basically half of Australia, and it was the whole of the British territory, but then gradually gets nibbled down.
Okay. Relatively small piece then.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, relatively being the word.
Yeah.
Culturally and socially, the area develops, gets the confidence to showcase itself in the Sydney International Exhibition in 1879. Politically, it stands on its own 2 feet, and in 1901, Queen Victoria announces that New South Wales is now a state of the Commonwealth of Australia, so it's getting a bit of more independent existence. World War I comes along, ironically quite a good time for Australia because the wool and their other exports are actually given a boost by that. But if you were an Aboriginal community member, there is plenty to be depressed about.
Why is that?
Well, in the early 20th century, the reservations that were set aside for your people were controlled by people with the Board of Protection of Aborigines. Sounds nice.
Yeah, it does. Sounds all right.
Sounds lovely, but there was an act in 1915 which gave the board powers to remove Aboriginal children from their families by force, resulting in what is known as the stolen generation.
That's less cool by a long way.
Yeah, so this time was, and a long time it was too, somewhere between 1 in 10 and 1 in 3 Indigenous Australian children were forcibly taken from their families and communities and rehomed elsewhere. And that went from between 1910 to 1970.
60 years
Yes.
of taking children from their families.
Yes.
Wow. The idea being what?
The idea was that I think it was supposed to integrate them into white society rather than have them raised in Aboriginal culture.
Wow. Okay. Awful.
Yeah, absolutely terrible. And I think we should talk about it in the verdict because it's interesting and probably not well enough known either. Now, World War II rolls around. Australia was not as safe as you might think. Japanese submarines attacked the city of Sydney and Newcastle, although they didn't do a lot of damage, so it wasn't too bad.
No, but still.
Still, yes, no one wants a submarine in their port, do they, unless it's your submarine. Thousands of Australians signed up to fight overseas with the Anzacs, the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, and they fought in the Pacific and Greece and Crete, and for that, we thank you, Anzacs.
Absolutely.
Now, post-war, you see more diverse immigration, a melting pot of cultures, and the economy of the area develops, less farming and heavy industry and more technology and service economy. 1973, the state and indeed the nation's iconic building, the Sydney Opera House, designed by Danish architect Jorn Utzon, was opened. And in 2000, Sydney hosted the Olympic Games, although sadly not yet featuring breakdancing.
Yeah, which is a shame because they are so good at it.
They are their natural winners. And astonishingly, Ryan, it was only in 2001 when New South Wales was officially named.
Wait, what?
So it was known as New South Wales, and it was New South Wales, but it didn't officially get its designation, sort of, I guess, written in the statute books, until 2001, 231 years after it was established.
Is that just out of laziness? Just people forgot to do it? Or
Well, I think it was more, do you know what? We never actually officially said this is New South Wales. We declared all the others, and what was left was New South Wales, but we never actually said that and wrote it down.
How funny. That's so cool.
Yeah,
2001.
That really made me chuckle when I found that out. But it's fair to say, Ryan, it's doing pretty well. It's not doing so well in the agricultural, industrial, inland areas potentially, but you've got tourism, you've got tech. It's a modern, thriving, bustling nation. I've met plenty of Australians and found them extraordinarily pleasant people to be around. Commentators say the coastal areas are set to continue to grow and thrive, and I've been to Sydney once, absolutely loved it. So I say, more power to you, Australia.
Yeah, good on ya.
New South Wales.
That was the history. Da-da-da.
Let's move on.
Cockroaches. Welcome everyone to our inaugural meeting of the Aboriginal Town Council. Now, I don't see Kevin here.
Well, he's dead. A crocodile took him down by the river.
Oh, and Tina, is she coming?
She's dead too. A funnel web spider bite. Look, it's horrible here. All the animals are trying to kill us.
Oh, come on, it's not that bad.
But what about the flies? All the flies. They're everywhere and they're really annoying.
Yes, the flies can be a nuisance, but what about all the land we have, eh? All this space.
The land is just scrubland and desert. I can't get anything to grow.
But what about the sunshine?
Yeah, it's bloody hot. We can barely go out during the day and fires keep breaking out.
Right, yeah, there is that. But kangaroos, they're fun to look at.
Yeah, but one of them punched me in the face yesterday. Look, be honest, Clive, it is horrible here. The animals are deadly, the climate is murderous, the land is hostile, and whatever is going on with the duck-billed platypus, that freaks me out.
Yeah, that thing ain't right.
We should never have left our homeland in those stupid canoes.
Come on, it's not that bad, is it? And don't forget, we're Australians now.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, actually. Well, all right, Cobber, fair income. She'll be right, I guess. Should we crack open a cold one and get really good at sports?
Yeah, mate, let's do that.
Struth.
Crikey,
Put another shrimp on the barbie.
you flaming galah.
No worries, mate.
All right, so we are going to get started on our stories very soon. But before we do, I thought, given that the subject of this episode is magic tricks, I would perform a magic trick.
Ooh, I love a magic trick, so I am all in on this.
Yeah, now obviously this is an audio podcast, right? So that limits the kind of magic I can do, because I could just be like, what card is it?
That is my card.
Yeah,
wow,
exactly.
right.
Wow. But no, so we're going to do a magic trick, all right? So we're going to start off nice and simple, Pete. I need you to pick a number between 1 and 10.
Do I say it out loud?
Yes.
6. If you now tell me, was your number 6, I think I've rumbled the trick.
Is the number 6?
Wow! This guy is amazing.
Okay, right. So now I need you to multiply that by 9.
All right, that is the magic trick. If I can
Yeah.
multiply it by 9.
Do the finger thing.
I don't know the finger thing.
Yeah, well, you multiply by 9. You put the number down of 6. If it's 6 times 9, you put the 6th finger down
Yeah.
and you get 54.
Oh, okay.
So if you do 7 times 9, you put the 7th finger down, you get 63.
Oh,
Clever that, isn't it?
I like that.
Yeah, so anyway, what was your number again?
54.
Right, okay. So you got 54. I need you to add those two numbers together.
All right.
The 5 and the 4.
Oh, right. Yes. 9.
Now I need you to subtract 5.
4.
Okay, now I need you to match your number to a letter. So if A is 1, B is 2, and so on.
Okay. D.
Okay, now I need you to think of a country starting with that letter.
Denmark.
Okay, now take the second letter of that country.
Yes. E.
Right, now think of an animal starting with that letter.
Elephant.
Okay, now what colour is that animal?
Grey.
Okay, well, Peter, I'm going to present to you now something. Okay, ready? What did I write down?
He's written down, everybody, grey Danish elephant.
Magic. Alakazam. It's a kind of magic, magic, magic. Woo. Woo. Doo-doo-doo-doo.
Oh, dear. That was terrible. Move on.
Is it this one?
No.
Okay, what about this one?
No!
Alakoroiden, is this your card?
No, it isn't.
Okay, well then it must be this one.
No!
What about this one?
No!
How about this one?
No!
What about these 3?
Another no, no, and no.
What about this one?
No!
How about that one?
No.
All right, Ryan, we're talking about magic tricks. We're in period 1603 to 1868, and we're talking about New South Wales. I want to know what you've got. Tell me. Spring the surprise. Let the prestidigitation begin.
All right, so yes, when I think of magic tricks, I think of all the great illusionists, right? People like Harry Houdini,
Houdini.
David Copperfield.
Copperfield.
Copperfield. Why have I never thought of that before? David Copperfield. Paul Daniels.
That's magic.
David Blaine, Chris Angel, all these people that we now know today, known for performing mind-bending tricks that defy reality.
It's up his sleeve.
Yeah, usually. They make objects disappear, they cut women in half, they link metal rings. And in one case, they regurgitate live fish.
Ooh.
Yeah. No, it's David Blaine. He swallowed live fish and then regurgitated it into a glass.
Oh,
yeah.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah. It's less of a trick than just
Animal cruelty.
Anyway, all these great magicians were inspired by performers that came before them, right? Many of them now lost to time. Extraordinary artists who first took to the stage and wowed people with magical feats that boggled the mind.
Like a boggling.
People like John Henry Anderson, the Great Wizard of the North.
Ooh.
So, born in July of 1814 on a small farm near Aberdeen in Scotland, Anderson grew up in humble conditions. So he was orphaned at the age of 10 and had to find work. He got himself a job as an apprentice at a travelling theatre company, which sounds like a pretty decent job, right? But remember, this is theatre in Scotland in 1824. It's not the serious and artsy entertainment we know of today. It was a cheap night out for the locals, filled with audiences of low social status that were largely drunk and looking to let their hair down after a week of, general miserable living.
If I'm going to take an evening off from my penury and misery.
Now, there's heavy drinking, there's lots of heckling, and fights are common. Not the kind of place you would want a 10-year-old to be. Attention spans are short, and as such, theatre at the time is basically variety. There's not like a play that you go and see. It's a series of dramatic scenes, it's broad comedy, it's musical interludes, it's bizarre acts like dancing dogs and acrobats and ventriloquists and strong men and the occasional, freak show acts, with like bearded ladies and the world's fattest man and lobster boys, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that Tom Stoppard season was a terrible mistake, wasn't it?
It really was, yeah. And so, look, this is the fantastical and yet dangerous world that Anderson finds himself in. But it's also where he meets a man who can find playing cards hidden in a deck and magic a string of handkerchiefs from his pocket.
Well, hang on, I can find a playing card in the deck.
You know what I mean. Now, astounded by a man who can find a card in a
Is
playing
this
deck.
a card?
It is. Look, he's 10 years old, all right? It's amazing to him. It is amazing to him. And he becomes obsessed. And everything illusion is his new world. And by his late teenage years, he started to dazzle crowds with his own tricks.
Yeah, he's a junior warlock.
Indeed. Now, age 23, he gets a big break. He's invited to perform for a prominent aristocrat called Lord Panmure.
Ooh.
Now, he's so impressed that he helped fund Anderson's first magic show tour across Scotland under the nickname The Professor.
Ooh.
He obviously clearly wasn't a professor. It was just a title that he gave himself because he thought it gave him an aura of learning and mystery.
I'm not sure there's mystery to a professor, but learning for sure.
Anyway, with the profits of the success of that tour, the professor then self-funds another tour of Scotland, followed by another tour, but this time around the whole of Great Britain.
Doing well. Good on him.
Yeah, and it's during this tour that Anderson is given a new nickname, the Great Wizard of the North, referring to his home in Scotland.
Ah, yeah. That is much better. He did well there.
And the Great Wizard of the North was a huge success around the nation, so much so that in 1840, at just 26 years old, Anderson opens the show at the New Strand Theatre in London.
Oh, lovely venue. Well done.
And he has these amazing rave reviews. It makes him one of the first true magician superstars. It was during this time that he also met, fell in love with, and married one of his show assistants, a lady called Hannah Longhurst.
Everyone should marry their assistant. That's almost a law for magicians, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Now, 2 years later, the happy couple have a son, who they call John Henry Jr.
Ta-da!
Yeah. So all is going well. Well, in 1845, Anderson's mistress, another woman in the company called Miss Prentice, she died giving birth to an illegitimate son called Philip. Now, despite being heartbroken, Anderson accepts the responsibility for Philip. He supports the boy throughout the rest of his life.
Oh, that's decent.
But, understandably, this whole scandal puts a huge strain on the marriage. Now, you'd think all of this was bad enough, but in the same year that Miss Prentice died and Philip was born, the investment that he'd made into building a new 5,000-seat theatre in Glasgow was obliterated when, months after it opened, the theatre burned to the ground in a huge fire.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it destroyed not only the theatre, but all of his equipment, his sets, his props, and his costumes.
Ooh.
And worse yet, he was also publicly accused of setting fire to the place himself as a way of claiming on the insurance.
Did he claim on the insurance? Is everything okay?
He did not claim on the insurance because there was no insurance.
That does add insult to injury, though, doesn't it? You did it for the insurance. There was no insurance.
Yeah. And so, no proof of arson was ever found, but the damage was done. The theatre was gone, and so was everything. He faced total bankruptcy, but he refused defeat. And with some financial help from some friends, he staged a comeback the very next year in London's Covent Garden Theatre.
Come on, make it back, John Henry.
Now, the show was a massive success, pulled in huge crowds, and by 1846 he had enough money to replace all that old equipment that he'd lost. He also had enough money to fund an ambitious new tour across Europe.
Ooh, I suppose you go and see him because you're like, well, I don't know when this is going to burn down, so we better catch it now.
Get in. Yeah. And so for the next several years, he travels across the continent. He performs in Hamburg, in Stockholm, and, importantly, St. Petersburg, among other cities. In fact, while he was in Russia, he had the honour of a command performance before Tsar Nicholas I, who was so impressed with the great wizard that he offered Anderson his patronage. And so he remained in Russia for the next several months, and he entertained all of the aristocrats and nobles, and he built himself a massive fortune.
Nice.
Yeah, and so by the end of the 1840s, the Wizard of the North was an internationally acclaimed illusionist. Good stuff, right?
Terrific. He's nowhere near Australia, though, I can't help but notice.
We'll get there. So, he returns to Britain in 1849. He performs for Queen Victoria. After which, in 1851, he sets sail for the United States. He does an American tour, which travels from Maine to California, and he plays in packed houses in every major city. And so by the mid-1850s, John Henry Anderson is arguably the most famous magician in the world.
Oh, wow.
And with this reputation and a huge fortune, he returns to London, where he performs for the next few years in every one of the major West End theatres.
Good stuff. Everything's going good for John.
Until March of 1856, and Anderson is performing in Covent Garden when, guess what?
It doesn't burn down, does it?
A fire breaks out that reduces the theatre to in quotes, a mass of ruins.
Oh, and he went to his insurance company.
Didn't have insurance.
Why would
With
you?
it.
Why would you, right?
Why would you? Exactly. It's to prove to people that you didn't do it for the insurance. It's very clever. Yeah, and so with the burning down of the theatre, he again loses all of his equipment, all of his sets, his costumes, and his props. And he faces near bankruptcy.
At least he knows he can recover again.
Yeah, well, he was interviewed by the press at this time, and he said it was, and I quote, the greatest misfortune of my life. Yeah. And it was, because yet again, he faced accusations of fraud, and yet again, he faced financial ruin. But, Peter, this is the Great Wizard of the North, and he wasn't about to lay down and die, was he?
No!
Exactly. So, in 1857, now in his early 40s, he commits insurance fraud. No. Now in his early 40s, he accepts a proposal from George Coppin, a young and enthusiastic theatre owner, to travel to Australia.
Hurrah!
Basically, he says to him, come do a tour of the colonies. And he says, all right. And the reason he says all right is because the contract was for 1 year, and for that he would pocket £10,000, which doesn't sound like very much, but equivalent to around several £million today.
I'll take it.
And he did. In March 1858, Anderson set sail from Liverpool aboard the steamship Monsoon with his agent E.P. Hingston, his family, and a cargo hold full of newly commissioned magical sets, props and costumes.
Yes, I'll make it out of dry wooden paper if you could.
Now, they arrived in Melbourne 4 months later, and he was welcomed like a celebrity. Within days, he made his first appearance at Melbourne's Theatre Royal, and the house was packed to the rafters. And the audience were not let down. After the fire in London, Anderson had invested heavily in new equipment that apparently cost him £4,000, nearly half the price of what he was going to be paid for a year's worth of work. It was an enormous figure, but it was worth it. Apparently, Australian audiences could not believe what they saw when they walked into the theatres. The press reported that the stage literally glitters with candelabra, goblets and vases, bearing the appearance of silver.
Wow.
Must have been amazing to see.
Must have been great. You've come off the sheep ranch and you're going to see that kind of opulence. That'd be incredible.
And in terms of the tricks and the things that he was doing, his act included producing lit candles from thin air, pouring endless bottles of wine from an empty container, making handkerchiefs dance, but most notably, the trick that he was most famous for was the deadly bullet catch.
Ooh.
Now, you'll be familiar with this, Pete, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but this is where he would invite members of the audience to load a marked bullet into a gun and then fire it at his face.
I always worry about the volunteering for that part. I wouldn't want to shoot someone in the face, however confident they seem to be that it was going to go okay.
Yeah, true. And of course, the trick is that he would then catch the bullet in his teeth, a trick that was known to have killed other magicians.
Yeah, the trick is you've got to spin your head as you catch it to try and slow it down. I'm glad you said that, Ryan, though, because I was slightly worried you'd say his big trick was where he would identify the nationality and colour of the elephants you were thinking of.
Ah, well, that would have been the most amazing trick. Yeah. Overall, though, the show was a huge success. The local paper reported that the people of Melbourne are delighted with the wonderful feats of the Wizard of the North.
Nice.
Now, as a bit of a side note, it was here in Melbourne that Anderson performed the first ever recorded act of pulling a live rabbit from a top hat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, apparently that's where that comes from. Yeah, he even made his family part of the act too. I added this in because I just thought it was funny. But one reviewer noted that, and I quote, his son assists him in his performances, and 2 daughters. The eldest, about 11 years old, endeavours to torture music out of a terrified piano.
Oh, that's nice.
Another one wrote that an infant prodigy, about 4 years old, sang a little song for the crowd that was endearing, but perhaps not the highlight of the night.
Oh, that's almost worse in its delicacy, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, after conquering Melbourne, Anderson leaves the state of Victoria and he goes on the next stop of his tour. Where do you think he goes, Pete?
New South Wales.
He goes to New South Wales!
Yes!
It's late 1858, within our time period, and he heads to Sydney in New South Wales. But there is a problem.
Oh, no. He's not
No,
set
it's-
everything on fire again, has he?
It's not fire-related this time, no. Apparently, there were a whole bunch of other rival theatre managers that had seen his success in Melbourne and decided that they were going to stop that success here. They wanted the money for themselves. So they blocked all of his performances by booking out all the venues for their own acts. So he had nowhere to perform. And so he decides the only available space is the Royal Lyceum Theatre. It's a venue that he described as dirty, desolate, dingy and deplorable.
I'll take it.
Yeah, but never one to shrink from a challenge, Anderson ran a newspaper notice announcing that, being prevented from taking any other place, I have leased the Lyceum at the enormous rent of £65 per week, and despite its condition, I vow to transform it into a fairy palace of magic at my own expense.
Oh, he's really embraced the challenge there. Good lad.
He did, and true to his word, he spent £500 refurbishing and decorating the entire theatre.
His visit was a boost for the economy of Australia as a whole, by the sounds of it.
Now, the residents of Sydney turned out in droves, and to the disappointment of all other theatre managers in the region, by early 1859, the Great Wizard of the North's magic show was the talk of New South Wales. He performed night after night in Sydney to full houses, until finally he packed up the show and the troupe headed out into the countryside. In March 1859, he travelled to the quiet rural town of Windsor, where locals, mostly just farmers, were astonished that this world-famous magician had turned up, and was not only that, but was performing in their local school hall. But they did come to see the show, and they were, and I quote, enthralled and held spellbound by the mastery of his tricks.
Imagine
Amazing.
going to your local school hall and Kylie's performing.
Yeah, amazing. Anyway, in April of 1859, he heads west into the Goldfields region. We were talking about that gold rush.
Indeed.
This is where it was happening. And he gave a series of shows there in a booming mining town in Bathurst, and he performs a mesmeric trance routine involving one of his daughters that apparently was so uncomfortable to watch, audience members reported that it was, in quotes, almost painful. Those daughters never get a good review.
Do not, do they?
No. Anyway, so for roughly a year, John Henry Anderson, he enthralls the New South Welsh people. But his success has unexpected results. All the money he's making with his show sees other entrepreneurial Australian magicians start to rebrand themselves. And soon, audiences across Australia are being offered with options of seeing the Great Wizard of the South, the Great Wizard of the East, the Great Wizard of the West.
This is getting more and more like the Wizard of Oz as we go.
Yeah, it is, yeah. In fact, one Aussie performer, a guy called James Eagle, he decides he's going to one-up everyone by changing his title to Wizard of the World.
All directions covered.
Now, his show didn't quite have the same level of success, though. One newspaper reported that while the people of Sydney are delighted with the wonderful feats of the Wizard of the North, the inhabitants of Forest Creek are favoured with an artist of inferior accomplishments.
Oh.
Ouch.
Inferior accomplishments. Whoa, zing.
Yeah, I liked the newspapers of this time. They were
brutal.
great. Anyway, by the middle of 1859, he's delighted Australia and refilled his bank account, and so Anderson decides he's going to move on. He schedules a final performance as a grand farewell, and he takes to the stage for a last appearance that lasts 8 hours. Yeah, on August 30th, 1859. At the final curtain, he stands before a cheering crowd and he thanks them for their immense success. And then he leaves. And that is the end of his tour of Australia. But he doesn't stop there, though. Immediately after leaving Australia, he goes on a tour across the Pacific. He visits California. He visits South America, the West Indies, Panama, India, Sri Lanka, before then becoming one of the first Western magicians to perform in China and Japan. By the early 1860s, he has literally conquered the world, and he returns home facing bankruptcy for a third time. He had been to America just at the outbreak of the Civil War, and all his money was with him, and he had to abandon it there to get out before, he was in trouble. And so he just left all his money in America.
Oh, man, this guy.
Yeah, really. So 14 years later, in 1874, Anderson's now 59 years old, and he's still touring, still being shot in the face. And
at some point, he's got to just put a regular bullet in, please.
Yeah, so he's on this, what he called a wealth tour in the north of England, and he's staying at the Fleece Hotel on Blackwall Gate in Darlington when he falls ill and he dies in his hotel room. His body's brought back to Aberdeen, and he's laid to rest at St. Nicholas's churchyard in the same grave as his beloved mother.
Oh.
Now, sadly, the years pass and his grave goes untended, and it falls into disrepair. Until in 1909, when a certain Harry Houdini visits Aberdeen on a pilgrimage to go see his childhood hero, the Great Wizard of the North.
Oh, wow.
Houdini had idolised Anderson and was distraught to find his hero's grave in such a terrible state. So, as a gesture of respect from one magician to another, he pays for the restoration of the grave and the perpetual upkeep of the site, which means that thanks to Houdini's tribute, if you visit St. Nicholas's churchyard today, you will find the headstone of John Henry Anderson intact, bearing the name the Great Wizard of the North.
Nice. Oh, and I really hope that Houdini, when he got the grave all cleared up, he put some flowers on by pulling them out from his sleeve.
He buried himself in the grave as well and went, I'm going to escape.
Burst out going, ta-da!
Yeah. In handcuffs.
Oh, dear.
Well, there you go.
What
How
a
about
tale. I must say, Ryan, A, that was fascinating, and what a guy. To be able to come back from all those setbacks. I did think at the end of his Australian tour he was going to turn around and fling a match into the auditorium.
Headbutted to death by a goat.
And it's amazing that he was so famous and so world conquering, and yet I hadn't heard of him, and I've got reasonably good showbiz knowledge even back to that time. That was a terrific tale, Ryan. Well done.
No worries, mate. How was the performance tonight, darling?
Oh, well, it was a bit of a slow one, to be honest. I think I need one really good new trick to really bring in the punters.
Oh, well, I'm sure we can think of something.
Well, if you could, it would be a great help, my love.
Right, yes. Well, I mean, I have actually got something.
Well, I'd love to hear it.
Good. Well, first, you ask for a volunteer from the audience.
Oh, very good, very engaging.
And you hand them a pistol.
Interesting, a little bit dangerous, maybe?
And you ask them to point the gun directly at your face.
At my face?
And then they shoot you, right in the face.
And?
Oh, well, that's it, really.
What do you mean, that's it? What's the trick?
I don't know. You're the wizard. You'll work it out.
Wait, is this about me having the affair?
No, I just think that some people would enjoy seeing you get shot in the face.
Right, well, I have to say, this does feel a lot like this is still about the affair.
No, more peas, darling. All right, Peter. Well, look, I have regaled you with my stories of magic tricks in New South Wales during the Edo period. It's your turn. What do you got?
Well, what I've got, Ryan, is a little bit of misdirection, actually, because I've taken a slightly different tack to the whole affair.
Oh, well, I'm intrigued.
Now, I think you'd agree there's a range of tropes in the world of magic. We've already talked about pulling a card from a deck. We've got pulling a rabbit from a hat you've talked about, escaping a straitjacket, and is this your card, you know?
Yes.
One such trope in magic is making things disappear, using nothing more than illusion.
It's a kind of magic.
Exactly. So, as I was researching the history of New South Wales, I came to the conclusion that the arrival of the settlers and the transfer of land from Aboriginal ownership to being somehow now belonging to the British was an act of sleight of hand, and it had all of the hallmarks of a magic trick.
I'm unconvinced. Convince me.
Well, you don't have to take my word for it, Ryan, because I put my theory to the test by enlisting an expert to help prove my point.
Wow, cool. Is it James Cook?
No, it is somebody else, and I will let him introduce himself.
I'm Richard Broom. I am a retired professor from La Trobe University in Melbourne. I have taught Australian history and Indigenous history for over 30 years. And in the last decade since retirement, I've been very involved with the Royal Historical Society of Victoria. I'm president at the moment, and I'm still involved in research projects, one in Indigenous history.
I regret doing an Australian accent now.
Yes, I've captured a real live Australian and a real live professor.
Fantastic. That's good news.
Yes, so to start my thesis, I asked Richard first to remind us of how the British first came upon Australia and what they found when they got there.
Okay.
So Cook was sent out on a number of voyages of discovery in the late 1760s to look for a great south land. And so he came upon, in his navigations, the east coast of Australia. He touched land at Botany Bay, almost the current site of Sydney, and then he was holed on the Great Barrier Reef, and his ship Endeavour limped into a place now called Endeavour River, where he had some engagements with Aboriginal people. And then as he sailed north, he stopped at an island now known as Possession Island, and in August 1770 claimed the east coast of Australia for His Majesty the King of England. So it's a very interesting situation because Cook's orders were to look for lands. If land was not owned by a European power at that time, he was to treat with the locals, and if he had their consent, he could make claims over the land. But if the land was uninhabited, he could take possession for His Majesty the King of England. Now, the interesting thing of this, of course, is Cook knew that the east coast of Australia was inhabited, and he knew this because he'd seen fires lit by Indigenous people all along the east coast. He remarked often in his journal when he was mapping the coast that he had seen fires. And of course at Botany Bay and Endeavour River he actually saw and met people and engaged with them either in a bit of a violent way or in a trade way up at Endeavour River.
Okay, wow. So he saw people, but maybe didn't see people.
Well, yeah, so Cook's found Australia and he's got a problem. His instructions say he can only claim uninhabited land and he clearly knows there are people there. So what can he do? And this is my first claim. His first magic trick is to make an entire population of people disappear. So this is what Richard says about this.
There were two existing practices in international law in the 18th century about ownership of land. One of them was that you owned land by being present on it, but the other one said that you not only had to be present, but you had to use your labour to gain ownership of land. God had given land in common to all people, and private ownership came through using your labour. So Cook had come from a country that was mainly agricultural. His own family was a farming family. So he, I think, adhered to this second view that you had to use your labour to be able to claim ownership of land. Now, his observations of Aboriginal people were that they didn't build structures, they didn't have any forms of government that he knew, and they didn't labour on the land in a European way, that is, through agriculture, growing things. So he said in his journal that they roamed the land like wild animals. They didn't seem to have territorial boundaries, structures of government, and certainly no land use as he understood it. So in his view, the land was waste. And later the term applied to that was terra nullius, land of no one. But at the time, they tended to use not that term, terra nullius, but the term waste.
Reference to them being wild animals is a terrifying one.
It's just horrible. And the terms that are used are not just wild animals, but waste. People living here and it's just considered waste. That's so bad. But yeah, terra nullius, land with nobody there. So the Aboriginal people don't work the land by growing crops and they don't build big apartment blocks. So hey presto, they just disappeared and it's terra nullius, land with nobody in it.
Okay.
But of course, there's two sides to the story, Ryan. It won't surprise you to learn that the Aboriginal people were fairly confident that they were actually there.
Yeah, I would imagine they did. Yeah.
So I asked Richard what the Aboriginal view of owning land actually was, and he said this.
Aboriginal people have a deeply spiritual relationship to land, and they have stories about how that land was shaped and formed by great ancestral beings. They have obligations to maintain sacred sites, to care for country, and so for them, country is owned through knowing the stories. So they had never any doubts that they were owners. Often that could be at a clan and family level of particular places and sites. But certainly there were territorial boundaries that were understood by themselves and their neighbours. And so if people wanted to use country for resources, this was all done through a series of protocols and understandings. And for instance, we know in parts of the country that there were protocols and rituals about giving visitors a freedom to the country to use it while they were there, freedom of the resources. In the Melbourne area, the ceremony was called the Tanderrum ceremony. The Tanderrum ceremony was the one that was observed by some very knowledgeable locals, Aboriginal protectors, in the late 1930s in Melbourne, and it was basically a ceremony whereby visitors were engaged with, and there would be a fire lit and gum leaves would be burnt and smoke would be developed and envelop people to give them freedom to take resources from the country while they were visiting. So it was a welcome ceremony.
So what he's saying is they didn't follow European ways of living.
Not only that, but also it's quite possible that what they perceived in the claiming of the land, they saw as the ceremonies and activities that were analogous to this welcoming ritual. So they were thinking, oh, these guys have come to share and visit, whereas the British are saying, well, I think we've clearly established that we now own this and you don't.
Right. There's a conflict emerging here.
So yeah, the Aboriginal people definitely have a concept of land ownership, but they also have this notion of protocols and ceremony to request a visit and accept a guest. So then I asked Richard exactly what is the process by which a European nation actually lays claim to land? And he told me this.
There are a lot of ways. The Dutch put tin plates up with a statement that they'd reached this spot and who it was and the date. Then, of course, Europeans made maps of what they'd found and claimed. Others ran flags up, or you might even plant things in the ground. There are a whole lot of ways of claiming ownership. But for Cook, it was the running up of a flag.
Okay, so just stick a flag down.
Job done, right?
I bet those wild animals don't have flags.
Well, this does lead to a thought, which is perhaps from the Aboriginal point of view, flag raising and parchment drawing and plate setting are all, oh, do you mind if we have a visit ceremony type activities? Not, do you mind if we take all this land and we own it now and you don't ceremony?
Well, yeah, how do they know what a flag means?
Well, exactly. So that is one theory, is that actually, do you know what, these guys didn't object because they didn't even perceive this as being the same thing that the British did.
Right.
Now, you could argue that a magic trick does require the intent to deceive, and maybe it was just a big misunderstanding. I asked Richard if that was possible, and this is what he said.
I think most settlers had a nagging doubt about what they were doing, but the British government said that it was Crown land, and therefore the British government leased it out and then later sold it to people who were land hungry themselves. I mean, England wasn't a place where there was any spare land, so that if you wanted to get ahead through land ownership, you had to go elsewhere. So people were very happy to come to a colony where they thought the land was theirs for the use of. It seemed to be bounteous and plentiful, and the government was telling them they could do it. But all the time, there was a nagging doubt amongst at least some settlers that they knew that the original owners were being dispossessed.
Yeah, easy to forget that, though, when you suddenly get a huge bounty of land in your pocket.
Yeah, is this mine? Oh, it's probably kosher. So yeah, likely the settlers, or at least some of them, were aware of the deception, but also so over time were the locals. You can't keep up this magic trick forever. It starts to unravel and become clear. And Richard explained how misunderstanding dawned to awakening as the Aboriginals basically figured out the trick.
You only were on land that you understood spiritually. You understood the stories that were connected to the land. Every place on that landscape had a meaning and had a name. So why would strangers want to come and settle on land they didn't know and understand? It was incomprehensible to them. But after a while, they realised that these guys were not leaving. They were bringing more and more stuff. They were putting up permanent dwellings. They were bringing animals they didn't want to share. You know, Aboriginal people thought this was a moral outrage that these people had come onto their land with all these juicy-looking sheep and they wouldn't share any. So notions of ownership and land were just totally incomprehensible to each other. But after a while, the penny dropped and Aboriginal people knew that these white fellas weren't going to go. And so at times when a settler would go into a new country to set up a sheep station, he might be met with an elder on the other side of the river waving his spear at him and saying, "Go away, you white buggers."
Yeah, no, and fully understandably so.
Exactly, yes. So, yeah, they figured out the trick. It had rituals enacted, it had an intent to deceive, it had a mystical transfer of land from one owner to another. So, in support of myself, Ryan, I asked Richard, who I may remind you is a real professor, an expert, an eminent fellow, if he could support my premise that the transfer of land from Aboriginal to European ownership was a kind of magic trick.
A magic trick is something that we don't understand how it was done. And so Aboriginal people were losing land and they didn't understand the forces driving European expansion, the capitalist system, the market economy, the factories of Europe, the demands for wool or other produce or minerals. And they were losing it to people who were given a piece of paper which was filed in a land office somewhere in the metropole area down in Sydney. And it was based on the Crown's claim it was the real owner of land. And then it was farming out leases and sale notices. So they had no understanding of how all this was happening, but it was happening. We know the trick occurred, that the land was transferred, but it was an opaque situation for Aboriginal people. And we can see this in the Batman Treaty, which was the only land treaty ever made. It was made by a group of adventurers from Tasmania who wanted to come to the southern coast of Australia and to take land, despite the government saying that this was out of bounds. The government was trying to control settlement and confine it to around the Sydney region by perhaps 200 kilometres out, 150 miles or something. But Batman came over and he allegedly signed a treaty with local Aboriginal people in Melbourne. Now, it was the only treaty ever offered until recent times, and quickly it was declared null and void by Governor Burke in Sydney, Her Majesty's representative there, saying Aboriginal people had no ownership of land and therefore could not deal in land.
So there you have it, Ryan. Yes, it was a magic trick. In fact, it was such an effective magic trick that when somebody actually eventually came along and straight deals with the Aboriginal people, offers to give them a treaty, it's too late. The government stepped in and declared the Aboriginals no longer even have a right to deal in land. At that point, the entire trick is revealed. The magic trick is complete and Britain declares all the land is ours now. Ta-da! Now that's magic.
It's not a great magic trick, though, is it?
Not for the Aboriginals, pretty good for the settlers.
Yeah, I guess so.
And this stuff is trickling through to this day. There's still talk about how the Aboriginal land should be treated. There's some considerations now about perhaps giving Aboriginals rights over the national parks and responsibilities as well. But it's still very much a live issue in Australia today, hundreds of years later, partly because this was trickery and not straight invasion or actual clear treaty signs. It's so controversial now and it's still a topic of great debate, partly because it was kind of a trick in the first place.
Definitely a trick in my book.
Yeah, well, now I had a much longer conversation with Richard. It was really interesting. And of course, I had to ask him if he had anything available for listeners who might want to know more about Aboriginal history.
Well, I have written a couple of books that people have found very useful over the years. One of them, Aboriginal Australians, History Since 1788, was written in a first edition in 1982. It was completely rewritten in 2010 in a fourth edition, and now it has appeared in a fifth edition in 2019. So it's the only, I think, volume that tells the story of colonisation across the continent and for the last 230 or 40 odd years. So it's been well received over the years. It's sold around about 80,000 copies now over the many editions. And it's published by Allen and Unwin, so it is available in digital form as well. So again, the title is Aboriginal Australians, A History Since 1788.
Yeah, there it is. Aboriginal Australians, A History Since 1788 by Richard Broome. So do, if you're interested in this topic, check it out.
And it's Professor Richard Broome?
Well, on the book, it says Richard Broome. So if you've Googled for professor, he is professor, he's a retired professor. But yeah, on the book, it says Richard Broome, not Professor Richard Broome, because he is a modest and jolly nice man.
Just occurs to me that both our stories featured a professor.
Oh, very true. What a coincidence. That's magic.
Alakazam.
Right, Ryan, firstly, thank you very much for your part. I found it very interesting. I've really enjoyed discovering New South Wales. But that's yesterday's news now. It's time to look forwards, my friend.
It is indeed. It's time for the Derzolation.
Wheeler out.
Okay, here it comes. I'm going to switch her on. Okay, we are good to go, Pete. Our place is Estonia. Okay, Estonia, that's all right.
That's good. I like Estonia. It's a nice place.
Okay, and the time is 1299 to 1922. It's the Ottoman Empire.
Ottoman? Oh, that's quite expansive.
That's fantastic.
Oh, that's just all the time.
That's so much time. Okay, and our topic is divorce.
Divorce? Ooh.
Yes, that's right, divorce. I mean, okay, divorce in Estonia during the period of the Ottoman Empire.
Well, I'm sure we can find something in that.
Yeah.
All right, look forward to it. It's going to be amazing. All right, Well, Ryan, I've enjoyed it very much, but that is, I'm afraid, our show for this week. Thanks everybody for listening. If you'd like to get in touch about any of the things we've talked about, or you just want to say hi, you can reach out to us through our website, hhepodcast.com, or you can email us, Pete and Ryan at hhepodcast.com.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you, and you never know, you might end up featured on a future show.
And if you're on Mastodon, Instagram, Facebook, or X, you can find us at HHE Podcast.
Yep, and if you subscribe to those, you're going to get an alert every time we post extra content, like facts we didn't use, photos from the show, other bits and bobs.
And of course, we'll be back again soon with
The Verdict.
But until then, a huge thanks to Professor Richard Broom.
Thanks, Professor Broom.
And a huge thanks to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Pete.
And that's it. I guess all that's left to say is...
It's a kind of magic, magic,
Magic.
magic. It's a kind of magic. Da-dum, da-dum, dee-doo-wee-doo. It's a kind of magic.
History happened everywhere. Hey Ryan,
Hey, Pete.
do you know what? I'm glad you recommended this chocolate. I bought a bar and I'm really looking forward to it.
Ah, well, thing is, Pete, that one's mine.
No, it's mine. I bought it.
Yeah, no, I know you bought it, but it's still mine.
I'm not with you.
Well, according to the terms of our treaty, anything in the house belongs to me.
Our treaty?
Yeah, you know, the one you signed. Look,
That's our lease agreement.
lease agreement, treaty, whatever you want to call it. Point is, it's legal and you signed it.
Yeah, but I didn't read it. Look at it. It's huge. And it's impenetrable. Here, this paragraph just says lorem ipsum est.
Yeah, I mean, that's Latin. It's how you know it's a legal document.
Oh, right. Well, I suppose if it's got Latin in it, it must be all legal and above board. So I suppose this chocolate is yours then. Well, here you go, mate.
Right, I'm going to go and enjoy this with a nice cup of tea in the garden.
Oh, no, you can't go in the garden, Ryan.
Why not?
Well, the garden's mine. You remember when I hung up the washing this morning?
Yeah?
Well, that freshly washed t-shirt also happens to be my flag. And by raising my flag, I claimed the garden as my own territory, and I herein, heretofore, and hereafter, lorem ipsum, forbid you from entering.
All right, well, how about you invite me into the garden and we can share the chocolate?
Sounds lovely, Ryan. I love the law.
Lorem ipsum. Is it this one?
No.
Is it this one?
No.
What about this one?
No.
Is it this one?
No. No, wait. Yes. Yes, it is.
Huh. Now that's magic!
Hello, lovely YouTube folks. This is a special message just for you.
Yeah, thanks for listening all the way to the end.
Now, if you enjoyed the show, please let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
And don't forget to take a moment to hit that like and smash subscribe.
Hit that like.
Yeah,
Smash subscribe.
yeah, it's what people say.
Do they, though?
Yeah, only the cool kids.
And you think you're the cool kids, do you?
No, we're the cool kids.
Oh, yeah, I suppose we are. All right, smash that like button, people. Smash it real good.
Oh, yeah. Nice.